If you have your scripture, I invite you to open this morning to Revelation 17. Revelation 17. I see, by the way, that somebody's keeping our pulpit Bible up here current. That's why it's almost near the very end of the whole Bible. So thank you for whoever's keeping it, turning the page and the marker and all that. Well, a house divided. This phrase appears, or something like it, appears in several works touching on political theory and philosophy down, at least in the English-speaking world. Thomas Hobbes, the 17th century philosopher, political theorist, and inspiration for the Hobbes part of Calvin and Hobbes. That's a bit of a joke, but Calvin and Hobbes is usually a little more accessible than just Thomas Hobbes. But his great work, Leviathan, you imagine, he's talking about the enormous beast of politic, of state. He says this, that a kingdom divided in itself cannot stand. Thomas Paine, in his 1776 little pamphlet, Common Sense, this little pamphlet that galvanized the American Revolution, he describes the composition of the English Constitution as that it has, quote, all the distinctions of a house divided against itself. And in our own American history, we have a little bit after that. In Federalist Paper number 4, John Jay wrote, quote, when a family or when a people or family so divide, it never fails to be against themselves. In the summer of 1858, candidate for U.S. Senator from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, he delivered one of his most famous speeches. It's topped only by the Gettysburg Address and his second inaugural address. And this was Lincoln's famous A House Divided speech. Let me read a part of that for us here. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest the further spread of it and place it where the public mind shall rest in the belief that it is in the course of ultimate extinction, or its advocates will push it forward till it shall become lawful in all the states, old as well as new, north as well as south. House divided is an unstable thing. But the reality is, as we all know, each of these references comes ultimately from the Gospels, from Christ's own ministry. For instance, in Matthew 12, 22 to 26, excuse me. Let me just read that passage for us. Then a demon-oppressed man who was blind and mute was brought to him, and he healed him, so that the man spoke and saw, and all the people were amazed and said, can this be the son of David? But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, it is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this man casts out demons. And knowing their thoughts, Jesus said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then will his kingdom stand? This is always true. Now, Jesus makes this point in the Gospels, in a sense that Jesus cannot be of the evil one if he is actually destroying the devil's house. That makes no sense, Pharisees. You guys are a bunch of knuckleheads. Go back and read Thomas Hobbes and Thomas Paine and, they hadn't been there yet. But it's also true in the passage we're going to look at today. Because just as Jesus would never tear down the kingdom of Christ because of the nature of his kingdom, Satan, however, only knows self-destruction. His kingdom is divided, and his kingdom will certainly fall. Jesus was saying more than perhaps we were thinking at the time, that he's just simply defending his role as the Son of God come to usher in the kingdom. He's also saying the reality of the satanic kingdom will be known by how it utterly and in the end falls apart. Listen now to Revelation 17, and I want you to notice how this satanic civil war progresses as God's righteous purpose. Let's listen now to God's word. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery: Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs, Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. Destruction, there. The dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. The 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire, for God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." This is God's word. It's true. Revelation 17 and 18 turns our attention to Babylon the Great and her coming downfall under the mighty hand of the Lord's judgment. Chapter 17 focuses more, if you would, on the identity of Babylon, her character, her attributes, some of her actions in that sense. Though the destruction of Babylon is imminent, we see that already in this text. Chapter 18 looks more particularly at what brings about the great declaration that we'll see in verse 2 of chapter 18. Fallen is Babylon the Great. In a sense, this is an expansion. These 2 chapters are an expansion of the 6th and the 7th bowl judgments that we just looked at last week in chapter 16. And it prepares us to look on the great last battle that we'll read about in chapter 19, verses 11 to 21. We're getting close to that great final battle in which Christ completely defeats and triumphs over all evil. And so we're going to see here in chapter 17, Revelation 17, how Babylon the harlot is the world's economic, religious, cultural, political system throughout all history. That is, it's the fabric of the world around us. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. And it's always been there. Well, at least ever since Satan made Adam and Eve, tempted them, they fell. There's always been this alternate system, whether it's Augustine's city of man image. Here it's simply Babylon the harlot. And we're also going to see here that what a house divided means for this false kingdom. Along with her identity, the Lord's angel helps John to see her strategy in gaining followers and ultimately how weak she is in spite of her impressive appearance. So be thinking about that. Be considering, what do we see about this Babylon, this this woman who's imaged as having such power and so impressive. What strategy is she using to gain followers? And what does her weakness look like ultimately in the end? Mainly the first three verses, give us an introduction to our scene here. One of the angels with the seven bowls comes back around and says to John, come with me. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you this judgment that we have been waiting for as the saints under the altar have been crying out to God, how long, O Lord? And this is the fulfillment of that prayer in some ways. The judgment is coming. And who's going to be judged? The angel tells John that it's the great prostitute who's seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. And he carried me away into a wilderness. So the angel's telling John, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you something that is impressive. The image that you're going to see many times here is this idea of the waters, her sitting on many waters. John's directly bringing to the fore Jeremiah 51 verse 13, which is concerning this historic city of Babylon. To this mystery vision, he says there, "O you who dwell by many waters, rich in treasures, your end is come. The thread of your life is cut." What's interesting is where Jeremiah speaks of Babylon beside the waters, here the woman Babylon is actually sitting on the waters. And the image of sitting on the waters is pervasive rulership, authority. It's having influence. Everywhere in Revelation, the word sitting is connected to rulership, whether it's rulership of God or Christ, or even the angelic beings having influence, or of evil beings having influence. So the idea of her sitting is this power to influence. And the image of the waters itself is talking about trade and commerce and wealth. It's dominant, the economic system of the world. All the waterways, as it were, flow to her and through her, and she is at the center of all of that power. And finally, just notice this. Where does the angel take John? Verse 3 carried John away in the spirit into a wilderness. And once more, we have this theme of wilderness come up. Previously, when we read about the woman and child and the heavenly battle up originally with the child who's great, or the woman who's great with child, and the anticipation of not only the Messiah, but of the church coming into being. And when it got into the heavenly vision of it, the woman retreated where? Into the desert, into the wilderness. And God protected her and provided for her there. Here, wilderness has a slightly different idea, though. It's being taken into the wilderness where God is at work bringing judgment. What's interesting about both perspectives is it all depends on where you are in relationship with the Lord, whether it's a place of protection and provision, or if you're estranged from God, whether it's a place of his punishment, where his judgment is imminent. That's worth thinking about here for us. The idea of the desert, it continues to give us this nuanced understanding that God is bringing us, even now, as the church in the wilderness, up close and personal with Babylon, who's also in the wilderness. God gives us security, but those who are aligned with Babylon the Great are going to be facing judgment. There's another part that you're going to see here in just a moment, that by going to the wilderness, God is also protecting John from what he's about to see. And it provides us an important lesson. So keep that in mind, that being taken into the wilderness where God provides and protects, when we see what John sees, because we saw that John is already mesmerized and marvels, almost to being seduced by the beast, or the woman. And so after being carried in the wilderness, John sees the woman. So the angel says, here's what you're going to see. And then now we're into the part of actually what he does see. he sees the woman sitting on a scarlet beast. Scarlet, like the scarlet letter, red. Where do we see red most recently in Revelation? Well, it's the red dragon. So here, once again, we see the beast identified with Satan himself as the serpent. So the beast here is the beast one that came out of the oceans that we've seen. So John sees the beast, full of blasphemous names. I mean, it's just, there's no mistaking what the beast is. It's an offense, and he sees it for what it is. In a sense, there's by seeing it in this context, John's under no illusion at all what the beast is. Blasphemy. It's horrible. 7 heads, 10 horns is pointing to different aspects of how the beast has, again, authority and rulership throughout this the church age. And we'll get a little more specificity about what's past, what's future in the latter part of the chapter here. But then John's eyes lift up and see the woman. Apart from a couple words that may make us jump out, just think about this picture here. She's arrayed in purple, scarlet, gold, jewels, pearls, holding a golden cup. She is fabulously wealthy. She's put together. She shops in the best places. When John says at the end of verse 6, when I saw her, I marveled greatly. This isn't just a passing, oh, that's impressive. It's the same word that's used of those who are engaged in worship. I think we're to understand that John himself is actually perilously close to this sense of being taken in by, wow, she's impressive. He's not. He's protected. And I think we should translate roughly the angel saying to him, why do you marvel? As basically the angel giving me a slap on the head. Stop it. I mean, there's an aspect here where John is safe because of who he is with the Lord protecting him. Even John the apostle is on the brink of saying, this is something to behold. Now, John's recording for us what exactly is in her golden cup: abominations, impurities. And then, to make it clear if there was any mistake, on her forehead was written the name of mystery. Whenever we see somebody having something written on their forehead, we know that they are identified and aligned with either God, because God puts his name on us, or they're aligned with the evil one. And which way do you think having a name like this aligns? Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. There is no mistaking that this woman is aligned with the beast, is aligned with the evil one. And then we see something of her character. She's drunk. She's drunk with the blood of the saints. That is, or even there's an and that connects this as an explanation. That is the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, those who have borne witness to Christ. The woman is drunk on the result of all the persecution of Christians that she's carried out. She delights in this such that it's a cause of her parties and celebrations. Let's drink a toast. Well, what shall we drink? How about bringing a few more Christians? That's the image that we have here. It is to say she's drunk. It means she's in a sense almost out of her mind with the fruit of her persecutions. And so the angel says, why do you marvel? Stop. And part of this, to be fair, I mean, John is recording for us the evil, vile parts here. So it's not that John was tempted to actually worship all the way, but she's powerful. She's daunting. She's impressive. There's she cuts a figure that you don't just lightly go against. maybe even John was wondering, how in the world can the church ever overcome such a powerful person? I mean, she's supported by the beast himself. Why do you marvel? I'm going to tell you the mystery of the woman, and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. Just to stop right there, the angel says, not only should you not marvel, John, stop it. It is a rhetorical question that way. He's going to reveal this idea that the name of mystery that's on her head, again, it doesn't mean that it's mysterious as in it's, kind of mystical, or that it's a kind of something to be sleuthed out like a whodunit. Mysterious, it speaks to the biblical idea that it comes to us because God reveals it to us. Sometimes mystery in the New Testament is speaking of that which is partially disclosed in the Old Testament and now fully disclosed in the New Testament. Sometimes it's that what was previously not known at all, God reveals it wholly new. That's what we're getting at here. The angel is going to reveal, he's going to tell John the mystery of the woman, to understand who she is and really understand what she's about, and explain the beast as well. That right there actually tells us a couple things. One, we already know that this picture of the Babylonian harlot, it speaks to all ages. That is, it's not the political nation Babylon. It's not the city-state Babylon. It's no longer Nebuchadnezzar walking out in Daniel 4 saying, "Oh, Babylon the Great, you're pretty awesome and I made you pretty good." That points to the reality of this going on forever and ever. Or not forever and ever, until the end comes. Similar language was used, by the way, to speak of the Philistine city of Tyre in Ezekiel. That Tyre would have this undue, outsized seeming influence, but also ultimately fall down to destruction. By the way, historically, Tyre is a really fascinating one of how it fell. Alexander the Great got tired of it, not getting in line with his Hellenistic plan. And Tyre was out on this prominent, was kind of out on an island. He basically filled in the entire causeway between, and took him a couple years, filled in the ocean and took the city down. That's what Alexander the Great did. So Tyre ultimately fell. But that's kind of pictures that idea of where this kind of political arrogance of the security, the sense of everything's great under Babylon's influence. It's not. But if the Babylonian harlot really is something that represents throughout the whole of the church age, this opposition that we face in the world, think about that for a second. Cultural, economic, idolatrous religious power that exists united in institutional form throughout history. How do we identify an institution like that? How does that kind of institution show up today? And what part of our contemporary world do we see government, business, school, churches even being influenced by the Babylonian woman? Part of it is that we'll see lots of examples. So some of I can see you either dozing off or your brain starting to think, oh, I can catalog a few of these things. Yeah, there's some easier, more obvious ones. But the very fact that the angel is telling John that he needs to explain the mystery, it ought to humble us to recognize that some of this discernment is outside of our reach from a natural human perspective. The wisdom we need to understand is wisdom that comes from God alone. With that, coupled with that, is that part of the woman's working is to always tempt to compromise, to give in, to just come and experience the good life here and compromise. Again, institutions that may look on the outside to be good, but actually still are connected and deeply rooted in the evil of the world system. You may think I'm going to sound like a curmudgeon in saying this, but how many of our global organizations that seek to do various kinds of good actually are carrying out fundamentally practices that are in opposition to God's word and God's way. The very same institution that may feed the hungry in a nation that's needing food may also be bringing in, along with that, a whole host of things that are absolutely reviling. I mean, that are abomination. That happens a lot. It happens enough that we should be paying attention. Now, you know what the deal is, that they're not going to be saying, they're not going to give you just the shiny, nice picture up front and not and hide the ugly stuff. The place that takes care of rescuing puppies isn't going to tell you about any of the other bad things they do. That deception happens all the time, I think. And there's another part that's happening here that we're seeing this in the language of being drunk on the blood of the saints, or the woman having this wine that she's tempting passersby with. As one commentator described it, said, what are the anesthetic effects of Babylon's influence? Anesthesia is a weird thing. I mean, I got a doctor here. Do we have any anesthesiologists? But you play with that enough, don't you, sometimes? Yeah. Anesthesia is weird. I mean, you forget things, don't you? The doctor tells me tomorrow I'm not going to remember anything part of my surgery, which is great. That's usually when they tell you don't sign any legal documents. So make sure my bride's not signing away certain things while I can't. No, that's me. I shouldn't sign away things. Babylon has this way of making even believers forget what God is calling us to. It makes it erodes our resistance to the destructive, the corrosive effects. It blinds people to even the ultimate insecurity or weakness of Babylon itself. I mean, what does John see? He sees something that appears to be incredibly strong. The woman's power seems to be almost unlimited, but that's a lie, isn't it? The appearance can seem to be far more than it is. The promise it offers seems to be good, but in actuality, it's a path to death. It's not good. It's evil. And it even makes it seem that the world can give security, but Christ alone gives security. Think about the ways that we can become numb to the world's influence on us. What does it say about where persecution comes from? That institutions themselves are arrayed against believers throughout the church's history, against even Christians today. You see places where dominant religions have taken over, dominant false religions have taken over, in a sense, political operation, and Christians are persecuted. You see, flip that on its other end, you see political places that co-opt, take over the religious institution, all for the sake of still persecuting Christians. I'll give you an example of that one. In China, the Three Self Church is the national church. You know what the Three Self Church's official name is? Three Self Patriotic Movement. Its official name is the Three Self Patriotic Movement. That, in a sense, China has said this church can represent, or this institution can represent Protestant churches in China, but as long as they serve ultimately the goals of the state. And that's not to say that there aren't true believers in the Three Self Church. It is to say that the Three Self Church as an institution has often been at the front of persecuting true believers. It's a hard place for Christians to exist. Somewhat on paper, it looks kind of sound and orthodox, except for the part where you say, but the government really has the upper hand. Do you see anything like that happening here in the United States? And dear saints, we have one Lord, one King, and that's enough. And what does it say about how we discern evil? Coming back, I'd mentioned that before, that we need to understand that wisdom comes from God. Oftentimes we think of wisdom only in that level of merely discerning decision-making, kind of, should I choose path A or path B? But to truly see, to truly discern what's true, we need to look, and looking ahead at verse 9, you see that here. This calls for a mind with wisdom. We're not going to understand this passage other than making it all about fanciful, clippings from the newspaper. Deb offered me one just yesterday. Said, "Oh, look, there's a new current kind of remembrance of an old prophecy." Because of course, now that the Pope has passed away and there's a in between before the next Pope comes along, apparently there's some old Irish, leave it to the Irish, some old Irish priest back in the 1100s who came up with some prophetic word about how many popes there would be before some sort of reset. And wouldn't you know it, Pope Francis, if you count right, was the 112th, which is the right one. But we're going to laugh at that, right? Do you know in the Protestant realm, we've had far more silly things than that going on within our own circles. We need to be careful about making fun of that. But wisdom says, no, call to God for wisdom. Don't look at the newspaper. We're not going to try and figure out, and that actually goes for trying to understand who the seven kings are. But it's amazing the number of folks that we're coming up in this next section who've tried to pick out which seven Roman emperors are represented here. Because you can't actually fit them all in. It doesn't fit right. But, we'll pick certain ones because they're more notorious than others. But once you start picking and choosing like that, you're kind of gutting the whole purpose of this passage. You're making it about somehow it only makes sense if I get the right seven. Unless, of course, you're going to have a resurrected Roman Empire, which, by the way, some people go for that too. Let's look to God for help. We see here as well in verses 8 to 14, more of how the beast operates and the deception of the satanic state that's being brought about through the working through the agency of the woman. But in a sense, we're pulled away from the woman in a specific view because we're looking at what the beast is doing, in a sense, on the ground underneath and making his evil motions. So, looking at starting verse 8, so the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit. That language there speaks about, it mirrors and echoes the language about God who was and is to come. The angel is showing John here throughout this passage that there's this mockery of the triune God that's all going on here, that the devil's doing that the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, or here the beast, the beast and Babylon pictured. It's this false trinity. It's this false kingdom. So the Babylon, I would say, is the false kingdom, and the dragon, beast, and false prophet are the false trinity, and it's paired as this kind of opposite, but not opposite. It's just the weak, poor shadow of it. The beasts or the beast realm is working in this world, where again, look in into verse 8, the world will marvel to see the beast. Again, that temptation to worship. And who's going to marvel? Those whose names have not been written in the book of life. Unbelievers will look at what the evil one is doing and his influence through the world system, and they'll be drawn into worship. They'll be aligned with him against God. And so we need wisdom. 7 kings, count them out, 5 whom have fallen, 1 has not yet come, another one will come who's only here a little while. 1 is, that's in the current mix. There's some way of saying that Babylon, or the beast's operation, has this political rulership, that there have been various kings. This pulls very much from Daniel, pointing to the succession of kingdoms on the earth and all that. He's not so much talking about 7 specific enumerate kings as all of the political power of the world has always had this influence that serves the beast. It's how the beast manipulates the world, draws us in for thinking it serves us when it actually just serves him. But look at also in verse 13, they're of one mind. They give their power and their authority over to the beast. Even as the evil one raises up political power to make his ends meet, they also come back and just give themselves over to him. So we need wisdom. We need wisdom. We need to look to Scripture rather than current events. We need to call out to God and ask him to help. And finally, look there at the end, verses 15 to 18. And this is the part that we wanted to start with, the self-destruction. And it's actually rather shocking. The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and language. So he's interpreting it for John. He's saying, okay, where she was seated, that is representative of all the peoples of the world, the totality of our history. She's been there influencing it, causing her influence to shape and affect all sorts of folks. In a sense, the opposite of every tribe, tongue, people, and nation to whom the gospel should go, we also see that Babylon has tried to influence every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. And the 10 horns that you saw, verse 16, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. That's a strange thing for us. I thought the beast was giving her a ride after all, right? He's kind of moving her around. He's the one who's actually empowering her influence. I thought these earthly kings, these earthly rulers who enjoy the influence that they get through serving Babylon were on her side. So what does that tell you about the loyalty that the father of lies has for those that he deceives? Does he actually do his promises actually come true? He does. He's not for serving us. He's for serving himself. And so here at the end, within, in a sense, this evil kingdom and evil trinity collapse on themselves and consume each other. Here specifically, the harlot, Babylon the Great, is first to go. They're done with her. She's served her purpose. They don't love her. Actually, they hate her. They despise her. They hate the prostitute. And look at what they do. They'll make her desolate and naked. Again, the idea of desolate, pulling on the idea of where is this scene located? In the wilderness. In a sense, the wilderness is going to win and make her desolate, naked, devour her flesh, burn her up with fire. There's nothing left. And you just wonder, what is driving their hatred? Well, their own evil. But look at verse 17. For God has put it in their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. That is, the woman's destruction is from God. The woman's destruction is partly, we'd say, oh, it's clear this internal backbiting and bickering and all that. But the reality is, ultimately, it's from God. God is judging the harlot, and her judgment is to be destroyed when she's gone. And it's all in fulfilling of God's word. Self-destruction is in view here. One of the things about this that's remarkable, let me just actually finish in verse 18. The woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. One of the things that's going on here is a couple of comparisons. The Babylonian harlot draws strongly on the images of Jezebel in the Old Testament. Remember Jezebel, Ahab's wife? Jezebel, not really a peach of a woman, but she certainly sought to make Ahab as strong as he could be, because I think she was also wanting to be as powerful as she could. Earlier in Revelation, in chapter 2, in the letters, we saw that the Jezebel spirit, representing idolatry, the sense of worshiping a false god or worshiping falsely, that it was still alive and active in the churches. In Revelation 2, verses 20 to 24, we see Jezebel being identified here in this first century, early second century context. But listen to the parallels here between the Old Testament Jezebel and this Babylonian harlot. And you're going to see even more strongly that John's wanting us to understand that Jezebel becomes a type, really, of this world system in opposition to God. And by the way, it further than links back to the letters to the churches, that false prophetesses like Jezebel can be active, at least one of the 7 churches. Commentator, scholar Greg Beale notes this. He says, both were heavenly adorned and made up. They dressed up to the nines. They both were queens. They both controlled seductively through manipulating that way. Both were guilty of spiritual fornication or immorality. Both engaged in witchcraft. Both were greedy for wealth. Both persecuted the saints. In both cases, Jezebel and Babylon, the harlot, there's a righteous remnant that opposed her sinful ways, that there were those who resisted, that she seeks to destroy. God avenges on both the blood of his servants when they do act against his people. The destruction of both occurs quickly, dramatically. In a sense, in this passage, it almost seems like it comes out of nowhere that suddenly we have this turn against Babylon. In Jezebel's day, the dogs did their business and finished her off quickly, like that. And finally, God judges the followers of both. If you follow Babylon, judgment comes, just as all those who followed Queen Jezebel suffered judgment. And so we see that Babylon the Great is creeping against, even into the church itself, raising his head to try and win the day. That's why I think we need to be careful to understand that even that Babylon here can put on the best of religious veneers too. There are churches that style themselves as Christian churches that are not, that simply have no regard for God's word, no regard for the claims of Christ in the gospel, no regard really for what God would call us to. They pick and choose a few things that basically reduce God to God's nice, Jesus is nice, we need to be nice like Jesus, which is not the gospel, and certainly is not an accurate picture of who our God is. But there's one other thing I think that's really helpful for us here in the context of Revelation, so it's a little bit broader, so put on your expansive brain caps here, think a bit. Just as there's a parallel between and an echoing of Jezebel and Babylon, there's also a contrast here between the woman Babylon and the woman that we saw earlier in Revelation, the one who was great with child, the woman who represents God's people, the bride of Christ. And these are contrasting parallels, and they're remarkable too. Because even now, during this contrasting reality that we have presently, during this entire first period, or this whole time between Christ's first and second comings, the church, the bride, stands in contrast and should stand in contrast to Babylon. One is a pure bride, Revelation 21:9, and the other is an impure harlot. The language of introducing each is almost identical. In 17:1 we read, as well as in chapter 21, verses 9 to 10. The bride of Christ is also richly adorned, but it's with a view of her purity, her being set apart unto God. Both are adorned with costly jewels and linen. The harlot's outward attire hides her inner corruption, but the bride's reveals the glory of God. One woman relies on heaven. Again, chapter 12, verse 1, where we first see her. And the other relies on the kings of the earth. The one who relies on the King of heaven is supported, comforted, and protected. The one that relies on the kings of the earth eventually is murdered by the same. And each is seen in a desert, and each is referred to as a city, whether it's the city of Babylon or the city of the New Jerusalem, Mount Zion above. As we wrap up, I want us to keep thinking a little bit more about, I'm going to pass on this quickly, but just, are there ways where we can see the world creeping into our own churches that we need to be honest that's a risk, it's a threat. It's not an idle thing that the world that we're somehow able to just, by its indifference to us, somehow it won't affect it. This week, keep your ears open. Ask the Lord to give you wisdom. Start asking him to give you discernment about where the world's ways are creeping into your own heart. And is that a way that's a pathway into the church through you? Do you see that anywhere? And how do we keep holding close to Christ? And I think the answer is simple. I think part of the reason we're given this is to know ultimately that no matter how powerful Babylon looks, we know that God wins. No matter how alluring she is, Christ is better. So we need to keep looking to Christ. We need to keep looking to him who's the Lord and the King of his church to preserve us, to protect us, and to give us wisdom from above. And I think we can have complete confidence that Christ will do that for us, his people. He's promised us in James, hasn't he? That if we ask for wisdom, what will God do? He'll give it. So let's ask for wisdom.